Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Be More, where we try to inspire you to be a little bit more of every role within the Salesforce ecosystem. For today's session, we are talking Be More Developer Architect, and I'm joined today by Evelyn. So, without further ado, are you able to introduce yourself to our audience, please?
Hi, everyone. I am Evelyn Grizzle. I am a Salesforce developer. I actually started 5 years ago in 3 weeks. So that's really
Wow.
exciting. I have been transitioning slowly into an architect role, and we're going to talk about that today. I have worked at Salesforce customers, ISV partners. I've been a consultant, which was not my favorite. So I'm excited to talk about the difference between like a consulting architect and developer and a customer architect developer. So
Hmm.
very excited to have this conversation today.
Okay, awesome. Well, thanks for joining us today. So, without further ado, are you able to kind of introduce to us your role and what it means, and I guess the types of things that you're involved in day to day?
Yeah, so I am currently a senior Salesforce developer in fintech and starting to branch into more architecture. And what that means is, as a developer, I write the code, and the architects kind of tell me what to write. So I'm working closely with architects to say, like, okay, this is the limitations of this possible solution. Like, should we do this in flow? Should we do this in code? Should we do this as a batch job? What time, if we run this batch job every 5 minutes, how's that going to impact our API limits, for example? So, lots of discussions about how Salesforce interacts with itself, as well as
Yeah.
conversations about how Salesforce interacts with other tools within our little toolbox kit. So that's like own backup,
Mhm.
AWS, different different tools that we use in our Salesforce toolbox to say, like, okay, this is the entire ecosystem. This is how we track our data. This is how we
Yeah.
back up our data. And this is how we recover our data if something were to happen.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. That's great. So you mentioned kind of interacting with architects that and you work together to ultimately work towards the best solution because I guess over time you kind of accept that there's pros and cons of each thing, right? What
Absolutely.
what type of architects do you work with? Are they more technical architects, solution architects? Because there's obviously lots of different flavors there.
Yeah, so I work closely with technical architects, which is where I would like my career to go in the next like 3 to 5 years, hoping to sit the CTA with my target CTA 2025 group that we're working on
Nice.
together. So if you're interested in that, I'll post some links on that towards the end.
Mhm.
But um, so working a lot with technical architects who are kind of the people who say, this is the integration we're going to build. This is the how we're going to build this integration. This is how all of our systems play nicely together. And sometimes they don't play nicely, and you'll get something
Yeah.
like a seven dwarves error, like Oracle poops itself, and you don't know what.
Yeah.
Those are some really fun errors to handle. So um, we definitely work a lot of technical architecture in a customer situation, and then in my role as a consultant, I worked really closely with solution architects as well. So,
Mhm.
a solution architect is going to be more of a person who says, okay, this is kind of, and this is in my experience, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but
Yep.
in my experience, the solution architects that I have worked with have been more detail oriented. Like a technical architect looks kind of at the big picture, how all the
Yep.
systems play together, and then a solution architect is going to look at like, okay, this is how we're going to write this flow, this is how we are going to write this code, and kind of more of a narrow scope, if that makes sense. So um, mostly working with technical architecture, especially in an enterprise Salesforce org. But yeah, I've worked with all of them. I love every architect I've ever worked with, which is why I want to go that direction. So I'm sure we'll talk about that in a bit.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. That's great to know. I have a lot of architects as well, so I'm glad we've got that in common too. And yeah, I agree. Technical architects are kind of more broader, whereas solution architects is kind of more focused. Like as a solution architect myself, I would be kind of almost prescribing the solution, saying, okay, we're going to use a flow or we can use Apex for this or whatever. and at the same time thinking, okay, what's the impact on sharing and security? And am I going to need to consider like restricted access and some other ways on how to achieve that with Flow or Apex too? So
Absolutely.
yeah, awesome. So you mentioned kind of interactions with other architects already. Do you interact with kind of people in a more kind of consultant type arena, BA arena? Like, how do you interact with other roles?
So, as a developer at a Salesforce customer, I work closely with my BSAs, my business analysts, and business solutions analysts, systems analysts, depending on who you ask. But it is working closely with a team of BAs and admins and other developers and architects as well. And basically, the way the ticketing works, tickets that we work as Salesforce professionals, the architects will say, "Okay, this is the big goal. We're going to break this epic down into little stories and say, okay, the if we want to integrate with this system, how are we going to do that? How are we going to do that? And uh, what are we going to use? REST? Are we going to use SOAP? Are we going to do a flow? Because we can do
Mhm.
HTTP callouts in Flow now, which is
Yeah.
exciting. So, um, is Apex really necessary for this requirement? What's the volume coming through? And so we will work with our architects to say, okay, this is the API limits we have. This is our current volume. This is our current data storage, and build a solution based on that. Business analysts will work with the business to say, okay, this is what the business needs. Kind of work with the architects to say we have a big project coming through. Q1's really huge for us in fintech. Q4 is really huge in fintech as
Hmm.
well.
Yeah.
And end of the fiscal year, lots of projects, and the business analyst will relay information from the business to us and help refine those into stories. And this is something that I really had to learn. Like I said, I've been a Salesforce developer for just under 5 years. I think the 22nd is my develoversary.
Anniversary. Yeah.
Right. But that was one thing that I had to really like hone in on, was how to story point and how to assess how long is this ticket going to take, and how long is this who do I ask for more
Mm.
information on this? So I go directly to my stakeholder, my BA, and that is going to vary based on what customer you're at. I've worked at small shops where we have one BA, you're working mostly with stakeholders, and then larger shops where you go to the BA because the stakeholder is too busy to do anything.
Yeah.
So, um, one thing I highly recommend, and this is something I try to say anytime I'm giving anyone Salesforce advice, is ask for help early, often, and know who to ask for help from. So,
Mm.
uh, that's something that I've really like honed in on in the last few years, especially in regards to story pointing, because everyone has a different view of how long a ticket's going to take, and how all the tickets form and fit together. And I don't know, it's something that varies person to person. And working closely with the BAs and architects to make sure that everything is pointed accurately, make sure that the burn down rate is good, and we're that's more of a BA task, is
Mhm.
taking care of the volume of the tickets coming through. Architects are going to be like, this is what the ticket says. Like, the architect tells me what to do, I do it. BA relays to the business. So that's a long-winded way of saying I work closely with a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome, and I think it's important because ultimately those relationships, those communications between those different people are key. And I can certainly relate to the pointing of the stories, like where I've worked before. Pretty sure we didn't call it this, but I'm going to explain it like this. We played like user story bingo,
Oh,
where
I love.
ultimately like we all voted, this is 2, this is 5, this is 8, in terms of the number of points, and then kind of collaboratively settled on like the middle ground. I think that was a kind of fun, in inverted commas, way to do it. um
Absolutely.
because yeah, there's definitely different ways of doing the same thing. Like even in Apex or Flow, like there's a million and one ways to achieve the same result. So there was that kind of part of the conversation too. And I've worked with other organizations that kind of run like backlog grooming too, where the
Yep.
developers kind of not interrogate, but work with the business analysts to understand, okay, like what's the purpose of this? Why are you doing this? Do you think those types of conversations are important too?
Oh, those conversations are absolutely important. And one of the best things I have ever done as a developer is sit with my end users and watch them do their job. And this is something
Mm,
that a lot of people I think kind of, may poo poo, like, I don't need to do this. I understand the business problem. But if you are sitting and watching, like, a bit about my background, I was in a call center 6 years ago, five, like, before I was a Salesforce developer, I was a database analyst, database coordinator analyst for
mhm,
E911 databases. And before that, I was in a call center doing technician calls. And there is a level of understanding that you will not get just from talking to your BA, talking to your end users. You can
mm,
actually see the pain points of, like, okay, this person is making this click, they're going to this window, and then they have to go to this window. And it's like, why not do it in an iframe? Why not do a
yeah.
canvas? Like, let's make let's reduce the number of clicks for the end user, make their job easier. And I don't know, it's one of the things that I wish that more folks in the ecosystem would get on board with, because I know we're always in the middle of cert wars and everyone
Yeah.
has opinions on certification, but I was really excited when the sales development representative cert came out, because it's like, I don't have a job if end users don't have a job, right? So
Mm,
understanding the job of the end user is really important. And you know I don't have a job because I wouldn't have a job if there were no end users. So I like
exactly.
to try and think of it that way, and make sure that not only are the BAs involved, but stakeholders and end users for that reason.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Yeah. And I think it's important, and in particular, the kind of ever growing world of Salesforce certifications and perhaps the competition in the ecosystem to get them, and then the competition in the ecosystem to talk about if you have too many or you don't have enough. It kind
Right?
of all mushes into one. And, but at the same time, completely get like, if you are working for a sales organization and
Mhm.
that salesperson needs to manage their key accounts, actually understanding like their motivations, what they need to do, what they need to achieve, and kind of leaning on a little bit what you said, the emotions in what they're doing as well. Because
Exactly.
I think that's really important, because obviously they're going to be getting frustrated if they have to click between six different windows to do one task. So I can totally kind of understand, like that was part of the reason why I took that cert, because I wanted to understand their role and then how I could help them better. So I think that's really good kind of rounded view there.
Yeah.
Um
And there was one project I worked on, and this was a few companies ago. I gave a talk on it at Forcelandia in 2021, 2022, and uh the the whole premise of the project is using a regular expression, which, if you don't know what that is, it's a piece of text that allows you to search within a bigger block of text to say, okay, I want to find something that matches this little pattern. So we can say, like, if this pattern matches, we want to swap it out for something that isn't going to break our SOCL query. And
mhm,
the if I had not worked in call centers and, like, really spent time with my end users, I would not have even thought to do this, because there are restricted characters in SOCL and SOSL that you can or cannot search with. And so, like, if you
mhm,
have an asterisk and I'm an end user at a company that doesn't have good data cleansing policies,
yeah.
I'm going to put an asterisk on my important accounts, right? And it's one
Mm,
of those things that it's a little thing. It took me a couple extra hours to figure out the regular expression and, the search matching and patterning, but it really makes people's lives easier when you do stuff like that. So
Yeah, exactly. Because also you can see it from the other side too. Like ultimately that salesperson or whoever it was that put that asterisk against that account, wanted to make their life easier. Maybe they could consider, I don't know, favoriting their accounts or something instead.
yeah.
There are lots
Mhm.
of different ways. I think that's important to see it from both sides, because then you can almost be in a neutral place in the middle trying to help from both ends. So that's great. Kind of moving on a little bit, but
Yep.
in terms of your role, you kind of describe your role as a developer who's somebody that's wanting to kind of work towards architect. Is that what you do full time in your day job? Like, do you do so much config and then testing, or kind of how do you split your time between your different kind of developer architect type responsibilities?
Absolutely. So this is a question. It's obviously going to depend on the company, but as a developer, the more senior you get, the less code you write, which
Yeah.
is kind of why I want to go the architect direction, because I like having my dirty little fingers on the keyboard, right? I like having my hands and stuff. And the reason that you write less code as you get more senior is because you are helping make architectural decisions. You are helping do code reviews for junior members of the team. You're coaching. You are helping to develop the skills of those around you as well as your own skills. So um, I spend probably about 50% of my time writing code or doing configuration, probably about like 5 to 10% of configuration, like 40 to 50% code. And then we've got meetings, tagging along in architecture discussions, and making sure that, yeah, just making sure that my team is growing as well. So it's kind of I don't know, there's a huge push in developer world right now. There's kind of a reckoning happening where there's a lot of developers that like want to grow up in their career, not like saying they want to develop in their career in a certain track, but there's always the, should I go people management, should I go more technical, do I want to be an
Mm,
IC forever, do I want to be a manager? And so it's really cool that Salesforce has these kind of pre-built paths that are like, okay, you want to keep your hands on the keyboard, but you want to grow in your career, be a technical architect, be a solutions architect. And
yeah.
I think that that's really cool because it's, I don't know, I get stressed out and I would not be a good people manager for that reason, I think. So it's one of those things that it's like, I don't know, very cool. Happy to be in the ecosystem because there's so many different career paths you can go down. And
Mm,
the more effort you put into the first years of that career, like it'll pay off in dividends, and it's really exciting to be able to be like, to, I don't know. I, especially as a more senior developer now, like senior dev, junior architect kind of role, it's very cool watching other people grow in their code. Like having discussions with my colleagues about, I don't know, I wrote some abstract classes which are like, if I have a vehicle, then there may be a car, there may be a bicycle, there may be a
mhm.
motorcycle, there may be a truck. And these can all be implementations of the abstract class that is the vehicle class. And like the grossest simplification I can give off the top of my head, but it, being able to discuss these things and watch people like grok it and understand it is a huge part of my job. So um, I always want to be writing more code. Um, that's just
Yeah.
who I am. I'm nosy. I like my hands on the keyboards, but as you grow more in your role, mentorship is going to be a huge part of it, and that's
Mhm.
why I like the Salesforce ecosystem, because everyone is always teaching and learning and growing together. So
Yeah, exactly. And sharing as well, because that's
exactly.
important. Because ultimately, if I do something and come across a limitation or something, it's much more powerful if I share that with people, because then they don't come across the same problem, that they're already thinking about it and kind of doing something differently to not have the same challenges that I've had. So I think that's super important. Kind of leaning onto that a little bit, but perhaps if there was two, three kind of key points of tips advice you would give to those looking to start out in this type of role, what kind of things come to mind? I think kind of connecting with community we've touched on already, and communication skills. Is there anything else that you think is important?
So I think you definitely don't have to have a computer science background. I
Mm.
myself do not. My degree is actually in network engineering, and I got it like it was personally important to me to finish my degree, so I did, even though I went in a different direction
Yeah.
with work. But I got my first software job at 27, got my degree at 29. I'm 32 now, and I the biggest thing, like not having a computer science background, take classes in Java. Like there are
Yeah.
free courses.
Yeah.
Um, Apex is based on Java, and the more you understand about the underlying like theory of programming and like abstract classes, that's one of the things about object oriented programming. There's four pillars. It's like encapsulation, polymorphism, and I can never remember the other two.
Yeah.
um, Being able to compartmentalize things and say, okay, I can take this big long chunk of code and say, break it into three smaller chunks that are easier to test and more reusable. So I definitely recommend Coursera has some good classes, Code Academy has some good classes, Solo Learn, uh,
Mhm.
all from free to cheap. I I pay for the annual subscription to Code Academy every year. It's like $100, $200, and
Yeah.
very worth it. Um, just to keep brushed up on the computer science topics. I don't think that that's necessary, but it will help you a lot. I've already said ask for help early and often. This is something I have had to learn in my career because
Mm.
coming from a non-traditional computer science background, being a
Yeah.
woman in tech, being non-binary in tech, it's like it's daunting sometimes. Uh, I sometimes feel like I have a lot to prove by like I have to power through and do this myself, and everyone's gonna be so proud of me, and then everyone's like, Evelyn, it's been a week. Where's your progress? And I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm trying. But so that was something I really struggled with at the start of my career, and I still struggle with it sometimes. But the thing that makes you look brave and makes people proud of you, and like, that's a person I want to work with, is being able to say, "Hey, Tom, I've been stuck on this for an hour. This is the resources I've used. This is the code I've written so far.
Mhm.
This is the Stack Exchange and the Reddit thread that I looked
Yeah.
at for reference. I'm stuck. Help me." And
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
the thing that like, being able to go to someone and ask for help not only like shows a little humility, and everyone loves a little self-deprecation, but in addition to that, it's like by making myself a safe person to ask for help, people are going to ask me for help
Mm.
and build those relationships, which are, as we've already discussed, super important. I work with BSAs, architects, developers, admins, like
Yeah.
end users, stakeholders, and building those relationships and asking too many questions. Like if you feel like you're being annoying with questions, that is how many questions you should be asking. You should be like,
Yeah.
was that one question too many? Ask one more. Like,
Yeah.
because
I
it's
yeah.
perfect.
I'm so glad you said that because I do feel like that a little bit. Sometimes I get in my head, right? And I'm asking questions and I just keep on asking, asking, asking. I'm kind of thinking to myself, am I asking too much? But I think you've just kind of validated that for me. So really like appreciate that, because what I say to people I work with and my clients as well, like I don't believe in silly questions. If you've got a question, ask it. I would rather you ask than assumed, because when you're talking about code in particular, you assume you do something a particular way, you kind of go down that path,
Yep.
and it's very difficult to kind of backtrack and change it because you made an assumption that was wrong, right? I would rather somebody ask than kind of struggle or go down a particular route that they then have to kind of come out of. So that's really great, I think. Kind of thinking again on your own kind of background and experiences, and hindsight is a wonderful thing, right? But if you were to change anything about kind of how you got started, what you learned, how you learned, that type of thing, is there anything that you would do differently if you had an opportunity to kind of start over?
Oh, absolutely. So I am like I said, I started in a call center. I was a barista 8 years ago. Like I've always had a technical background. I went to
Mm.
school for chemical engineering. I hated it. It sucked. I was not very good at it. Some life stuff happened. It is what it is. But in terms of where I'm at now, I'm very happy with it. But the thing I would change is I was studying for exams completely wrong. And like when I started as a consultant, I was hired on as an entry level Java developer. They were like, just kidding, you're going to learn Salesforce. And I was like, I
Yeah,
guess, paying me.
yeah.
And I ended up really loving it. And the thing that I would change about how I spent that first 6 months of my career, one, certifications, I personally think do matter. I'm not going to debate this
Mm.
I will
Yeah.
debate this in the comment section on LinkedIn with you.
Yeah,
Tag me, at me.
yeah.
But it's instead of going on focus on force and taking the practice exams, the Salesforce Ven practice exams, there's a few others that
Mm.
are the
Udemy and yeah.
yeah, Udemy and the good practice resources. I believe in those because I'm a bad test taker. I have test anxiety. I'm like I read the questions not enough. I like skim over stuff just because that's who I am as a person.
Mm.
And instead of practicing for the tests, what I do now is I write as much code as possible. And then I will take the practice test right before I take the test. I take it once, like maybe twice, maybe three times over the course of like, if I'm studying for a cert, 6 months, I will take the practice test 3 times.
Yeah.
Whereas early in my career, I would drill the practice exams. I'm accidentally memorizing answers that aren't
Yeah.
going to be on the test. And I think the most helpful thing for me was like sitting down, writing the code, and being like, okay, this is what a batch job looks like. This is what a queuable job looks like. This is what JavaScript looks like. Like the JavaScript exam is literally just like, okay, you have this line of code, this string A B C D E F G,
Yeah.
unshift, pop, reshift, like all
Yeah.
these JavaScript commands, and you have to like parse it out and say, okay, so unshift is adding something to the start, pop is removing something from the end, and you're not going to learn that unless you actually do it. So
Mm.
um, the thing that I would change is as much hands-on time in an org as possible.
Yeah.
So the study resources, fantastic. I'm a focus on force ambassador. I love the product. Like it's the practice exams are great. The study exams are great, but I would use the study exam to help fuel my learning in the org and then take the practice test like once or twice just to
Mm.
baseline check my knowledge. So I think that that's a trap a lot of people fall into is just accidentally memorizing answers that aren't going to be on the exam because
Yeah.
you can't do that. So you have to understand the process, and that was what helped me early in my career was making that switch from I got to take this test, I got to pass to like no, I've got to learn how this works. So
Mm. Yeah, no, totally get that, and I can also relate to memorizing the question bank as well because I kind of have that brain, right? I
yep,
do like doing things physically and learning, maybe not so much with code, but like with flows and whatever else it is. And I did fall into the trap of memorizing the question bank and then going into the exam and completely kind of flunking it because I knew the question bank. I didn't know the actual content or the theory or how to apply it because I hadn't, you know? And I
yep,
think that that does definitely show, and I'm glad that kind of Salesforce have kind of, I don't know if new generation of exams is the right phrase, but exams like JavaScript developer and PD2 have that hands-on part too.
Oh yeah.
It's part written exam, part super. Yeah, exactly.
Oh
Part
no, I'm taking PD2
supervision.
on Thursday, and I'm like,
Okay. Well, best of luck for that. But I think that is an important part of the skill set. Actually, knowing how to do it,
mhm.
and the theory of it is two separate things. Like I have, for example, I have PD1, right? But I wouldn't consider myself a developer or be able to start to write the code. I just know the theory of the code. It's different. So
Mhm.
I think that's important. And maybe that brings us nicely onto the next question. But if there was one thing you'd like to change or make people more aware of, like in terms of your role, is there like a myth or something that you'd like to clarify for our audience that kind of is perhaps a misconception about what a developer or a developer architect is? Any thoughts on that?
So you don't have to have a computer science background to learn it,
Mhm.
but it's also not for everyone. Like,
Mm.
you have to have a specific brain that, like, the way I describe my job, I am solving brain teasers all day, and I love
Yeah.
that. That's not for everyone. So everyone can learn to code. Not everyone will enjoy it, but if it is something that you have ever been interested in pursuing, do it. Like, it's so fun. Like I said, start off with a course in Java to kind of get that theory down. Like, sign up for a Code Academy. I think it's free for Java.
Mhm.
JetBrains has a course. Solo Learn has a course. Udemy,
Yeah.
YouTube even. So write as much code as possible, see if you like it, and if you want to grow your career in this direction, there is nothing stopping you. Like, don't self-limit yourself. Don't self-select yourself out by saying, I don't have this background, I don't know this. What is an abstract class? Oh my gosh, you said that thing about some
Yeah.
cars, and way over my head. Like, that was way over my head until like 6 months ago. So
Yeah.
um as long as you have a desire to learn and you like solving brain teasers, like, it's a
Mm.
great role to be in. And it is very easy to transition. I don't want to say easy, but it is very possible to transition from an admin role into a developer role. Shout out to Rad Women Code really quick. I'm a coach for them.
Mhm.
Teaches women and non-binary admins to be developers. um, I highly recommend going the admin route first if you are curious about this, because admin teaches you the underlying database structure, developers manipulate it, and then architects tell chumps like me what to do. So,
Yeah.
uh,
So thanks again for your time today. It's been a really great session. But before we do go, you've mentioned some great resources already. What's the best way for people to connect with you? And is there any content of your own or others' content that you kind of wanted to take the opportunity to kind of shout out and point people to?
absolutely. So, uh, we talked a little bit about kind of leaving breadcrumbs for people, that, it's important to leave no trace, but also like help folks find their way. So I started another salesforceblog.com 4 years ago in October, actually.
Mhm.
And I don't post very often, but when I do, it's an excellent post, and I highly recommend it because it's all stuff that I could not find anywhere. So I have my first year as a Salesforce developer, I wrote stuff on like the ant migration tool, and how
Mm.
to how to do child records in a REST API, and all kinds of stuff like that. So just stuff that, little breadcrumbs that, if you can't find it, it might be on my blog. Especially like dated conversion rate objects have to be updated through the REST API. So uh, I have that. I am on Blue Sky, I guess, sometimes. And then in terms of resources, I'd like to shout out, obviously, Rad Women Code. Uh, coach for them. Wonderful organization, helps to upskill folks with marginalized genders into developers. We are adding a Lightning Web Component class, which is Red
Nice.
3. So I'll be helping out with that, and I'm very excited. I also like Warren Walters. He is a great person to follow on LinkedIn, posts a lot of great resources for learning how to be a developer. And then my final shout out, unless I can think of another one, there's so many people to shout out to.
I know.
Ladies Be Architects is a really good organization. They just launched a scholarship fund that will help folks with marginalized genders to become architects. So in order to qualify for the scholarship, you have to have been in the Salesforce ecosystem for 3 years, if I'm remembering correctly. But you can get cert vouchers, you can get classes, you can get CTA prep, and really good organization. Has been instrumental in my career. I love them. They're all wonderful. And then the last shout out, Scale Up Architects as well, is another nonprofit that takes folks who don't typically go for architect roles and upskills them into architects. So I've been taking a class with them as well, and it's been wonderful. So my shout outs, Warren Walters, if you want to be a developer, Rad Women Code, if you want to be a developer, and then Scale Up Architects and Ladies Be Architects. All wonderful organizations and wonderful folks.
Yeah, and I'm glad you shared those resources, and in fact, a kind of little sneak peek. But I'm talking to Warren in a couple of weeks' time for another episode. So he's got my attention, and we work together as well on Flowfest. So
I bombed at Flowfest when I did it. I was so bad.
You can't be everything,
right?
Yeah, and likewise, if you got me to write some Apex, I would be really bad as well. So it's fine, we're each to our own. And I think in particular, like the Ladies Be Architect stuff, that content that's kind of out there, and it's still out there on YouTube, like in particular the content about identity and access management and all those different, and I still get it a little bit muddled, but all those OAuth flows and everything, like there's some great resources there on YouTube. And in particular, like there's a great article on Gemma's blog as well about those different flows, and the way that she broke it down really resonated with me, and it kind of helped me get through that exam, because she was talking about BBC, which is something in the UK, which I instantly related to. And then I was like, okay, now I understand like what type of flow the TV is using for when I'm putting in the verification code or whatever it is, So those resources are really great, and I hear about them, and a lot of people rave about them. So they are definitely good, having used some of them myself. So that's awesome.
I do want to shout out Ladies Be Architects is for everyone. The scholarship is for folks with marginalized genders, but they make all of their everything public and freely available. So it does not matter what your gender is. Ladies Be Architects is there for you. They're wonderful. So
awesome. Well, thanks again for your time today. And hopefully there's a lot of goodies in this episode. So I'm sure when it goes out, we will help more people be more developer architects. So thanks again.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to Be More with Tom Bassett. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave any feedback in the comments.